Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. And our guest today that we have on the show is Galen McNamara. So he is the CEO and the director of Summa Silver. And today we're not only just going to be, finding about, who Galen is or what his company is, but most importantly, we're going to be talking again about financial wellness. So I'm really excited to have Galen on the show today. I think there's a lot of value that's going to add to a lot of our listeners who are listening. So starting off, Galen, welcome to the show. And if you could just share a little bit with us, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, hi, Ben, and thanks very much for having me on. That was a very nice introduction, and it's always great to talk about Sumo Silver, but I don't really get too many opportunities just to talk about, my background or what kind of motivates, myself or us as a company. So myself, I'm a geologist going back about 15 years. I'm originally from Toronto, but like a lot of people, I've ended up in Vancouver. And I've just always been into exploration and discovery. Back when I was 18 or 19, going back to 2003, I think, I got the opportunity to spend a summer in the bush on a drill program. And the geologist at the time gave me a lot of opportunity, and we were drilling for copper and for zinc. And you know what? I kind of caught the exploration bug right there. And since then, it's been, I've had a really interesting life, being able to travel all over the world, and have been involved in some very large, discoveries, and have been lucky enough to be involved with some projects that have had a lot of success. So now, I've really just devoted my time, my professional life to focusing on precious metals, primarily with Summa Silver on silver. And that's where we are. Well, that's where we are today.
Thanks a lot, Galen. Good to get a little background of kind of how you got into it. Obviously, it was your studies, as you just said. And I've noticed recently you made that kind of transition into more silver and gold, right, in terms of your company. But before, you were in other types of discoveries as well, too, right?
Yeah. So before this, well, first of all, to start the story from, what I've done most recently, before putting Summa together, I really spent 2 years looking for projects, looking for a precious metal project, knowing that, the bull market wasn't, too far off. We'd never know when we were going to get into it, but we knew it wasn't too far off. And I didn't really need a day job, so I could spend my time looking at 100, 200 projects, which is really what I did over a year and a half, 2 years. Before founding Summa and really getting into what we're doing now. But before doing that, I was managing all of the drilling for a company called Next Gen Energy. And of course, we made some very large and high-grade uranium discoveries in Saskatchewan. I think it's pretty safe to say that those zones are probably the best undeveloped uranium deposits in the world right now. That takes me back to 2014, and hey, that's not to pat myself on the back by any means. But I think when you've been involved in, a technical win like that, as a geologist, and as someone who, like myself, I'm generally business minded, it really teaches you about, what to look for, teaches you like what works and what doesn't. And I guess the whole takeaway from that is that, you really got to swing for the fences. You really got to think big. And that's how the real wealth creation happens in this industry. It's the generational deposits that get discovered, and there's one every few years, and gold and silver, that discovery rate is declining fairly rapidly right now. But at the end of the day, that's the way to do it. So my whole philosophy is go big or go home. So that's the grounding kind of thing, that I'm trying to look for, because if you're not going to look for something big, if you don't give yourself the best chance you can have to find something big, well, why waste time?
Absolutely. And, I appreciate that expansion there on kind of, your background and kind of how you've gotten where you are today. Every investor has a story, and so Before hearing, like we've heard about your professional background, but now hearing more about your investing story.
Sure. So, because I'm a geologist, and because I've spent most of my life or all of my professional life working in exploration, my portfolio is probably unhealthily weighted towards exploration plays. But I may have a bit of an advantage over your average investor in that. I'm experienced enough in the geology side to know what's good and what's not, which is actually very hard to do without just having that experience. Because I think as an investor, if you're just new to this and you're looking at mining companies or precious metal companies or what have you, especially in the junior space, you'll find that you very quickly get bombarded with 1,000 different stories, and how you separate the wheat from the chaff as a new investor is almost impossible. So for me, coming back to your question about my background as an investor, and more these days, I think of myself as an investor, or I should say an owner first of the companies I'm involved with. That ownership mentality. And second, as a geologist, and that's just been a little bit of a transition, for me. But for me, I just see, what's happening in inflation and what's happening, with money printing, and things we'll get into with precious metals being shorted. And I look to examples from the past, and I see what happened in the past. And hey, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, history repeats itself. So, my approach to an investor is kind of, I'm a little bit all in on those ideas, which, may or may not be smart in the long run, but hey, either way, life will go on.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some people right now listening on the show, they don't know much of the precious metal sectors, or maybe they're new to just straight out investing. And, when they're looking into things, it gets kind of hard sometimes, right? Especially when there's a lot of noise, right? Like, do I invest in, a tech stock, or okay, there's the precious metals, but it's very volatile. So if someone now is looking at the precious metals, which is obviously what you specialize in, why would they want to invest in the precious metals? And most importantly, why would they want to invest in silver? Because your company is actually more focused, right, heavily on silver. So if you don't mind explaining why they should invest in this sector over other sectors, and as well as why primarily right now in silver.
Yeah, that's interesting, because like we are bombarded with investment ideas, all the time, whether it's tech stocks or are hot right now, or just small caps in general. If you follow the Russell 2000, or coins, Bitcoin, cryptos, which I think are an interesting investment too. But when I talk to people about precious metals, what I like to say is there's just so many ways to win. Okay, so number one, we've got inflationary pressure with the U.S. government, and now they've done what? I think they've done 2 stimulus checks now, and they're talking about a third one, or every American gets $1,400 on each check, and no matter what your status is, everyone just gets it. I mean, you got to think about how much money that actually is, and where is it coming from? I mean, it's not from increased taxes by any means. It's from the money printer. So they just print more money to kind of pay people off with their own, basically what they own already. And there's really only one thing to happen when you start talking about these major money printing events that I don't think can end or are going to end anytime soon, and that's inflation. So precious metals really are a very strong hedge against that, and silver and gold are the oldest forms of money around. They've been real money for millennia. To think that that's going to change anytime soon, I just don't see that happening. Hey, like, going back to the point that history repeats itself. And then when you do have those inflationary environments, you think about gold and silver both going on runs. And hey, I'm not saying own one or over the other, but generally and historically, you look at silver versus gold, and in bull markets, silver outperforms gold, usually substantially. You got to start to think about, why is that? Well, the uses for silver are many. Something like 20% of silver produced every year is for investment purposes. and the rest is for industrial, for jewelry, other things like that. So you look at the other side. So that's, inflation is one way to win. Well, what's number two and number three? Well, the second one really is that industrial usage. As the price starts to go up, because of increased investment demand, that leads to a little bit of a positive feedback where industries who require silver really need to secure supply. So that helps the upward pressure as well. And then the last one is that silver is becoming this real stealthy green metal. The auto industry used something like 50 million ounces of silver in their vehicles last year. And as we transition towards more EVs, which is obviously coming, that number just continues to grow and grow and grow. And then the other thing that silver has a big input to is solar panels. So, we start thinking about, me personally, I don't see why there's a reason why we don't put solar panels on every roof, and on everybody's house. It's free energy and it pays itself back over 2 or 3 years or something like that. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. But anyways, each solar panel uses something like an ounce of silver, and that doesn't sound like a lot. But when you start thinking about big solar build-outs, which are starting to happen now, it actually comes quite significant pretty quickly. So, that's it. I just see in precious metals, you can win on so many ways that thinking long term, I think it's a way to go. Now that being said, of course, we've seen a bunch of volatility in the last little while, where in the last year we've run from $15 or a little less all the way up to touching $30. So now we've pulled back and we're sitting at 25, but even from a $25 price point where we're at now, I start to think about, how high could silver get? Well, in the mid 2000s, well, I would say starting in the mid 2000s and then going forward to 2010, 2011, you had silver run up substantially, $5 to $50 or whatever it was. So where could that go today? We're sitting at 25. Well, I like to come back and look at the gold silver ratios of silver in the ground. And, there's something like 15 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold. But the price ratio is, 70 to 1, not 15 to 1. So I start to think to myself, well, where could this go if that's going to start to even out? You can start to project triple digit silver very quickly. So that's really kind of it, where I just see a lot of ways to win.
Nice. Yeah. Well, you know what? I think you did a good job explaining like the fundamentals and focusing on the why, right? Because whenever we're making any decisions in our life, especially when it comes to finances, you got to know what you're doing, right? You got to know the why first. Yeah. And then that actually kind of follows with also knowing the what, right? Which you kind of already touch upon, some of the different ways that silver actually adds value, right? Whether it is to inflation, like you were saying, or as well as through all the industrial plans that are going on in the future, whether it's in cars, kind of like you were saying, or other kind of things, solar panels. But what are other aspects of silver of where it shows value? Because you gave some examples, but what are more examples for people really to understand the full picture?
Yeah. So you can go back to things like holding silver bars if you want, or coins, which I do, and I think I find that once you hold these metals in your hand, you feel like you're holding money in your hand, which is nice, and less so than like necessarily $100 bill. That's just a piece of paper. The silver is actually you're holding money. You go back to way back in time when we were on a gold standard, basically, which is just another form of precious metal, and you can think of them almost the same. That we didn't have, that we just don't have now. Now it's our fiats have no real backing at all, and they're only valuable because governments say so, and we continue to use them. But the same isn't really for precious metals. You could start building I wouldn't call it a portfolio, but you could start building a lot of metals quickly in the way that you might invest in an RRSP. You might take a percentage of your income and buy coins and then just put it away as a way to kind of hedge against, number one, inflation, and rising demand could and should help prices. But at the same time, we're kind of fighting against concentrated short positions in the actual paper silver markets. So when we talk about the silver spot price of $25 an ounce, have you actually tried to buy an ounce of silver for $25? If you did that today, you couldn't. You'd have to go online to someone who sells coins, like a dealer. And if you look at the premiums, you can't get an ounce for less than $30 an ounce. So that's the real price of silver, is what it actually costs to buy an ounce of silver and have it delivered to you. Whereas the paper markets are dealing in futures contracts. And the minimum contract size is 5,000 ounces of silver or something like that. And what these contracts do every month is they roll over and settle in cash. And typically in the precious metals markets, especially in gold, but it's happening in silver too, you've got a concentrated short position run by 6 or 8 major banks that are very, very good at keeping it to the price that they want to keep it at, and have made a lot of money shorting it using tactics that the CFTC, the regulators, have actually called criminal, but they just don't have any power to really do anything. It's kind of like the Keystone Cops chasing the Star Trek Enterprise. Okay, so it's like, okay, well, we're seeming to be in this David and Goliath situation, right? But if you look back through history, there's really good examples of when there's concentrated short positions run by, only a few, say, bad actors, to put it politely, that when the market really comes back, I mean, you can break these short positions and really cost these big banks a lot of money. And the last time that happened was in the palladium market, 5-6 years ago, where there were 2 or 3 or 4 concentrated short positions, really got ahead of themselves. And when that industrial demand for palladium, really changed and it became really important in the world, like it is for silver right now, well, those short positions got smashed and we saw 5x gains in the underlying commodity price. So, it's interesting in that, as a silver bull, you're up against some pretty big bears, but that's just the market we're in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so what can someone who's new to investing or already in the market, what are ways that they can invest in silver? Because there are different ways that they could protect their wealth, right?
Yeah.
And make these decisions. And obviously, your company is one of those ways, but what are the ways, if you were to break it down and explain it, to draw out the picture here, what are different ways that they could invest in silver to protect themselves?
Yeah, well, I mean, the simplest, easiest way is to own physical. But you start to look at, the premiums you're paying, and can you get a better deal by buying some financial instrument. So, own physical, I buy coins every month, I buy bars every month, not a large amount, but hey, you find that, incrementally over time, it starts to stack up, as to use a cliche. The other one is, you can look to the ETFs, but you have to be careful because a lot of the ETFs don't actually back up what they're selling you with physical silver in their vaults. So one that does, that's 100% backed by physical silver, is PSLV, the Sprott Silver Fund, which is of course been very, they've been putting away silver. They've been buying a lot of silver in the last few months. And if I had to say there was one, that would be the one that, I would want to own. That, and then you can start looking at, things like senior mining companies that produce silver. There's a lot out there, there's 4 or 5 big guys that, will be highly leveraged to the price of silver, probably more so than the actual metal itself, in a real bull market. And then you want to start looking at junior companies like Summa Silver. But the thing with, the junior companies like us, it's, we're probably the highest leveraged to the silver price. So I would look to junior companies, and that's where most of my holdings are, for the largest gains when things get going.
What would be one piece of advice that you could give someone before investing in silver stocks?
Yeah, I would. There's good community support and online places now like Twitter, and even on Reddit with this new Wall Street Silver subreddit that I think is interesting, where there's a community of people that are going to be supportive of questions and of helping out someone new with what's good and what's not. That's number one. And then the other thing I would say would be to, spread your bets out a little bit. And don't, I've been just to get a little off topic here. I've been following this TikTok investor thing on Twitter and seeing some of the moves that new investors have made and have lost a lot of money. I would say, hey, don't YOLO into this at all. Scale into it over time.
So now, if we just transition a bit, let's focus now a bit on what you're doing, right, and the impact that you're able to have right now for people. So if we look at Summa Silver, if you could tell us a little bit about it, as well as why it would be a great opportunity for investors.
Yeah. So Sumo Silver is a company that I started about a year ago. They say the best place to find new mines is right next to old mines, and we're an exploration and discovery focused company. So we went into a place in Nevada called Tonopah, and got the eastern half of this district, and this is one of these Wild West historic mining districts that produced for 50 years, but after 1950 didn't really see any modern exploration at all. So one thing as a geologist, that's just I like to keep it really simple. And when I see a world-class district that went back 100 years, and it was one of these places that really helped shape the identity of the American West. And I say, okay, no modern exploration, never drilled. There's in those situations, there's always juice left to squeeze. There's always great targets. There's always things to find. And that's the thing, we've started to hone in on that. We just did our first drill program there last year, and are about to start drilling again in another week. And then, we just found some great results and super high grades. So the property obviously has a lot left to give. But that's kind of one thing in Nevada. But then we've got something similar in New Mexico, where another one of these historic mining districts that hasn't seen any modern exploration, and there's just walk-up targets there where we can just bring a rig, put it down on the property, start drilling, and just start building ounces very quickly. So that's our plan. But the other thing too, more selfishly and personally, as a geologist, getting a chance to go into some of these places and take our best shot at making a big discovery, going for that 50 or 100 million ounces. As a geologist, and we're spoiled in that there's a lot of targets, but because of the history, everyone that I know and all of my colleagues want to take a shot at this. So all of our geologists are just hungry to make a big discovery. So that's what we're pushing on now is being aggressive and going for those numbers that we know that the markets are going to really like.
If we think now about other silver companies, because you were kind of mentioning before how there's different types.
Yeah.
What are some other ones that investors should keep an eye on?
Well, I like, and I'm a shareholder of many, but as far as silver companies go, I would say Vizsla Resources is one that very few people understand how many ounces are actually going to end up being there. But look a little further up the chain too. If you start to look at companies that are a little, I won't say more advanced, but start to look at the producers like the First Majestics or the advanced development companies that already have drilled out deposits and are now maybe thinking of building something. You might look at Discovery Metals, or I guess they just changed their name, to Discovery Silver, is one that I like. But there's, for me, we're focused in the U.S. and those are mostly Mexican companies, which are great places to be. But as far as U.S. companies go, there are just not too many. And we think for Summa, that's part of our competitive advantage is operating in the United States.
Okay, great. And if you were to think of, the top three sectors that you think are going to perform in 2021, what would you say that would be?
Well, let's just keep watching the precious metals. Silver and gold are going to move together if and when they do. Uranium one that is one that everyone seems to be on the cusp of. I'll stick to the metals, and I think that copper is looking good, nickel is looking good, zinc's going to start to look good. For me, I'm watching the Russell 2000 really closely. I think that when that starts to break down, that's when it's on for precious metals. So I feel like we're on the cusp of something here. When it's going to explode, I don't know, but we're going to prepare for when it does and try to get as many positions as I can and as many companies as I can that I think are quality. So I'm ready for it.
Awesome. And another question that's kind of fun here, but we were talking about this before, right? We're both from Canada, both you and I. Everyone knows Canada for hockey, right? So it's similar to the NHL, right? There are all-star players, know, in a hockey game, right? And same thing when we look at anything in life, right? Especially, let's say, investing. If we look at the mining sector, right? There are winners for sure. If you were putting together, a forward line, left wing, center, and a right wing, who would you make the top line? So what I mean by this is it could be, someone educating, right? It could be, like a silver guru. It could be, financial leader anyway. So who do you think those top three would be?
Gotcha. Well, I might do more than three. Let me try to give you the whole 6 guys on the ice, right? So I think, for me, and these people are all, accessible on Twitter or wherever. They all have services, or some of them have services you can subscribe to for not very much money. Totally, a lot of value there. So, I look to starting on Twitter. I look to Gold Ventures on Twitter. He's a guy that I follow and posts a lot and has a lot of good insight. Another person who I really like is Ted Butler. He has a newsletter that he puts out a couple times a week. And if you want to learn about how the silver market is manipulated and how it's shorted, he's the perfect guy to educate you on that, because he's been studying it for decades. The other guy, one of the other people I like, Chris Marcus, Arcadian Economics, also is really in tune with the silver market in general and how it really should, we really should see triple digit silver in the not too distant future. So that's 3. David Morgan's another really good person to follow. Craig Hemke and Eric Sprott, when they do their weekly wrap-up podcast, is very informative. And then finally, let me try to think of one more, maybe a geologist or someone that's pretty good. There's not too many geos that are out there, but there's actually a guy on Twitter. What's his username now? I'm just going to look this up really quick. I think he's from Belgium. He's a geologist, and he's really interested in trading options. So he's got some interesting insights on options and does a lot of silver companies. I think his name is PAPAWS. I've learned a lot from him too. So there you go. That's 6.
Nice. That's a good lineup. You know what, Galen, thanks a lot for everything today, but is there anything else that you want to add?
You know what? It's just like our time is coming. It's happening now. And like I was saying, I'm positioning myself personally as an investor in as many quality deals as I can, because I think we're on the cusp of something large. I look at what's happening in the markets, and I look at this whole MMT movement and all the money that's getting printed. And then I look at the green economy, so I just see win-win for precious metals and win-win for silver. So that's my philosophy right now, and everyone should act accordingly.
And Galen, where can people find you if they want to learn more either about Sumo Silver, or if they just want to follow you and learn more about your knowledge of silver? Where can they go?
Sounds good. So I don't even know my own Twitter handle. I have to look it up right now very quickly. I think I'm at Galen McNamara on Twitter. Summa Silver also has a Twitter account at Summa Silver. And also find me and the company on LinkedIn. We're there, and I think you'll find that we're pretty approachable. And like I was saying, before we started recording here, when people reach out to me on Twitter, I always respond. So yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Galen. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope to have you on again in the near future.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. It was great to chat with you, and yeah, let's do that.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be considered personal, legal, or investment advice or a recommendation to buy or sell securities or any other product. It is based on opinions, current events, press releases, and interviews, but is not infallible. It may contain errors, and Living Your Greatness offers no inferred or explicit warranty as to the accuracy of the information presented. If personal advice is needed, consult a qualified legal, tax, or investment professional. Do not base any investment decision on the information contained on Living Your Greatness or our videos.